In the last video, I didn't speak about the aftermath of the eclipse intentionally because it connects to the conviction arc. This one's going to be spicier than the rest because I'm going to rant a bit this time. We're heading into the events of the first arc and going beyond. Guts' revenge is just starting with the most of the band of the Hawk dead for Griffith's dream. Guts finding a family had its price. Casca, overcoming her fears to rescue Griffith, had a price. No matter how unfair the world is, there will always be consequences. In the process of rescuing Griffith, Guts lost an eye and half an arm, but also left a void in his heart that only revenge could fill. Only 3 people remained from the band. In turn, Casca lost herself and her voice due to Femto's action. As a consequence of the assault, Casca and Guts lost the connection they had, since she's also afraid to be around Guts, but also men in general. In the last video, I mentioned PTSD can be a consequence of sexual assault. Casca exhibits different symptoms than those that Guts had. Sexual assault is not only physical violence, but also mental violence. Although rare, people can lose their voices due to the traumatic experiences. PTSD typically takes the form of nightmares, flashbacks, and feelings of guilt and shame that can surface right away or years after a trauma. But it can also manifest in physical ways like chronic pain, intestinal problems, muscle cramps, or a paralyzed vocal cord. For 94% of survivors, symptoms last at least 2 weeks. For a full half of them, they persist for years, even decades, sometimes long after the victim thinks she has laid the ghosts to rest. Despite it being a realistic portrayal of trauma, I would have been okay with this if this was a short-lived part of Casca's arc, but it wasn't. It lasted from volume 14 to volume 41. That's a lot of time to hinder her meaningful presence in Berserk. Taking away her voice for that long felt like a cop-out to avoid dealing with the aftermath of her assault, her rejecting Guts to care for an injured Griffith, and everything else that happened. She's a main character, for fuck's sake. Anyway, I'll leave my wrath for the next review. That's going to be a spicy one. Last but not least, Casca has a natural abortion, a fetus from Casca's and Guts' union. Corrupted by Femto's hideous action, the fetus doesn't reside in the mortal world. It is not human nor a demon. The creature is something else entirely. The loss of a child is something that parents should never have to experience. So, after all these characters have been through, they also experience the loss of their child, even if they didn't know Casca was pregnant. Given what they had to face in horror and shock, Guts tries to stomp it to death, but Casca protects her from him. The Skull Knight even recommends they kill the child due to the circumstances in which it came to be. Since demons disappear during the day, when the sun rises, the spirits fade, and the same goes for the demon child, leaving its parents behind. While Casca cries out for the child to remain, Guts only holds her, unable to do anything else. Realizing the child was Guts', the Skull Knight explains the child will appear again, yearning for its parents. Beyond what these beloved characters have lost, they will have to face a lifetime of nightmares. Casca and Guts will have to face demons for the rest of their nights, and they will have to flee and fight them if they want to survive, making them strugglers. I hit a reading slump here. Not that I think it's a bad arc or anything, but because the pace of the main story slows down. We get the consequences of the eclipse and the reason behind Guts' revenge. Miura gave us this at a slow pace, but never deviated from the focus of the story. Now, what's next? More revenge. Although beautiful with themes of its own, the Lost Children arc felt like filler because we already know what Guts did after the eclipse. He went after revenge and blood and found that it was a journey not worth having, finding out his weakness as a man. Guts also began to find friendship in places he didn't think he'd find, like Puck. Somehow we just get more of the same of what happened in the Black Swordsman Arc, with the knowledge of what happened in Guts' life. In Berserk, some arcs like this one reminded me of The Last Wish, in which we follow Geralt in successive short stories, but it's not connected. Each story has a life of its own, and we get to see the same characters every now and then, like Jaskier and Yennefer, but they're not connected to a major story. The Lost Children arc felt like a short story showing more about Guts' revenge and nothing more added to the main story. If we never got this arc, we wouldn't have missed anything crucial about the narrative for the major storyline. Ever since I read it, I was conflicted about it because, first of all, it felt like filler because it's not really connected to the main story, although Rosine was one of the apostles that attacked the Band of the Hawk in the Eclipse. But second of all, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful arc with themes of its own. In Berserk, the motives of light and darkness are subverted in an obvious way, beginning with Griffith, the beautiful blonde man, and with the Black Swordsman, who actually fights demons and it's not evil at all. In the Lost Children arc, this subversion of tropes is the most sinister by far in the whole story. Of course, the elves in the story are demons, but the locals and the children don't know that. Even the children Rosine turned into demons don't know they're demons, but vehemently think they're elves. Taking on a corrupted form of elf, Rosine leads a pack of demons with the intent to save children who were mistreated. She thinks to know what's best for them, perhaps seeing herself in them and wanting to help them. The Misty Valley takes the form of a common trope in fantasy associated with a dreamland where peace won't be disturbed, like Elysium or Heaven. We know far too well it's a demon's lair. Even though the characters and the place itself take on a good form, their true facet is rotten to the core, being antagonistic forces. The fire Guts uses to burn down the cocoons of developing elves as a purifying influence in this case, setting the abducted children free from Rosine's lies. Fire consumes and warms, provides light, but it also can bring pain and death. Its symbolism varies depending on the context that it's used. Like my view on this specific case in Berserk, many rituals involve like an eternal flame, equated with birth and resurrection. The fire that engulfed Rosine and her minions, even the village's lands, mark the end of a cycle of abducted children, of children in pain. Amid all the revenge, Guts suddenly remembers that Casca exists. It felt forced, but I was glad that he was moving on from the revenge plot. Good and evil are notions often associated with monotheistic religions. Christianism has gods and angels opposing the evil demons and Satan, similarly to Islam and Judaism, which also have angels and demons of their own. They differ from Hinduism and Taoism, or Shintoism and Wicca, which have spirits or deities who are not as boring as good or evil, but can perform good and evil actions. The Holy See is an undeniable parallel to Christianity in the Middle Ages. They had great influence over kings and therefore countries and wars. I'm not certain if Miura wanted the Holy See to be so much like Christianism, but it reminded me of it, following a similar good and evil ideal. The place of God and angels in religion is far different to what they are. The Godhead are more demons than angels, or perhaps a bit of both. Their nature is more inspired in polytheistic religions, where the spirits have a less straightforward nature. There is no doubt that in Griffith's mind, all he is doing is for the greater good. But does that make him a symbol of goodness? I think not. On the other hand, the Holy See also worships a righteous God that protects them from harm. It just also happens to be the symbol of a falcon that resembles Griffith, who is actually more of a demon. Miura has questioned the nature of good and evil in Griffith, Guts, and Casca. After the eclipse, the world suffers changes far greater than Guts and Casca. Farnese is the character who best embodies the breaking of the traditional religious order, even the general order of the world. Although Miura made us question how certain characters should act according to morality, Farnese is the focus of this question, specifically in a religious context. Unlike all the characters we've seen so far, Farnese is someone who had a comfortable life, even though she was heavily neglected by her parents. She was an attention-starved child who was indulged because of her status. In Serpico, she found a safe place to be herself without having to be cruel. When the time came, as a noblewoman, she was nominated the leader of the Holy See, which is always a woman, leaving political acts for the subordinates, acting more as a symbol rather than actually leading the Holy See. In this sense, Farnese started to defy traditions, wanting to have a more active role as a leader. Azan acted as vice commander, aiding Farnese loyally. None of her subordinates like her, probably because of this. As Miura said, the concept for Farnese was a female office worker who's been in society for a year or two, may or may not be accustomed to her job yet, and is ill at ease in a masculine society. There is also a duality to her, like an evil part of her that wants to see people suffer, and she even gets off at watching people burn. The sexual part was kind of unnecessary. As Miura admitted, her frustration is moving in a sexual direction, although half of it includes my own delusions. So yeah, that happened, so yeah, I'm thankful that kind of disappeared after after she left the Holy Chain Knights. Driven by the prophecy of the Falcon and proving her worth to her parents, Farnese sets on a journey that changes the way she sees the world, shape-shifting reality into a more faithful status. As Farnese follows Guts, suspecting he might be an evil entity, she unravels the mysticism of the world. Guts defies everything she's ever believed in, the Holy See, the gods she worships, and even the people she admired, like Father Mosgul's. Not everything is as it seems is the core theme of Farnese's character arc, exposing it further beyond Griffith and the world his characters live in. The world can be rotten as it is beautiful, untempered by a righteous God who looks over humans like they're special. In contrast with Farnese, Serpico is kind of a flat character, being a blind follower of Farnese's. It makes me wonder how much research Miura put into siblings' relationships. If you have a sibling, you hate them sometimes. You love them, but you hate them. It's not like a brother or sister can't be protective of the other, but it's not just that. I'm protective over my sisters even when I'm hating them at the moment. Yes, Farnese doesn't know their siblings, but Serpico does. For a woman exhausted by society, he sees to her needs and considers her before all else. I thought this might be a woman's everlasting dream. No, Miura. No. Miura created him thinking about the man women want around, which is kind of weird considering they're siblings. It's the only relationship I find out of touch with reality. I just can't agree with this kind of approach to any character, man, woman, or NB. It's not like I don't like him, but I'm also not particularly fond of Serpico. The birth ceremony is an event that has been prophesied in the Holy See scriptures. As recounted by Hazan and Farnese, the revelations say that when the sun dies 5 times, a red lake will appear to the west of the city with the name of both old and new. It is proof that the 5th angel will alight. The angel is the falcon of darkness, the master of the sinful black sheep, the king of the blind white sheep, the one who shall call upon the world an age of darkness. The prophecy is quite literal, although it might not seem at first. While the first sentence alludes to the eclipse, the following 3 sentences speak of Femto's birth and decision to take a human form as the master of demons and king of humanity. The rest of the prophecy refers to the consequences of this rebirth. I'm honestly kind of questioning still why this ceremony had to happen, or at least the way it happened, because it felt like a copy and paste of the eclipse. It didn't feel too different, The conviction arc was literally that. Guts had a wake-up call from revenge to remember Casca exists. Beyond that, it introduced characters who will be Guts' newfound family, from Farnese to Serpico and Isidro, who is just a mix between the cute and idiotic Puck and the kind of violent and scummy Guts. We didn't need more comic relief, in my opinion, which is the only thing Isidro brings to the table. And why would you leave Casca to Isidro, for fuck's sake, Guts? He's a child! For Griffith, the birth ceremony raises far more questions as to why he chose to take a physical form on Earth. The consequences of his rebirth bring about further changes to all planes of existence, blurring the line between the mortal and astral worlds. It is never explicit why he chooses to do this, but it certainly is plain that it suits his goals, besides taking back his fabulous looks. By bringing demons into his army, he has an advantage in battle, making his glory seem divine to the eyes of said white blind sheep. Of course, changing his looks also makes him more of a believable saint in a way for humanity. On the other hand, it also makes me wonder if being in a human form makes him more vulnerable to physical attacks, since Rickard does accomplish that further in the story. Spoiler. It would be ironic if Griffith made himself vulnerable taking a human form, driven by his ambitions to become king. No matter how beautiful the Lost Children arc is, or how it might be interesting for some to know Farnese's and Serpico's backstory, Guts and Casca's story is slowed down by a lot. As another negative, Casca lost herself, her voice, because of the aftermath of the eclipse that lasted longer than it should have, hindering the agency of a main character who is as important to the story as Griffith and Guts. And she also became the driving force behind Guts' actions, like a knight and a princess in distress. As a fan, I was kind of saddened by it, and I wouldn't have minded if it was just, for this arc, but it wasn't. Like I said before, it was like till chapter 41. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.